Welcome to Social Media Breakfast for June. I am so excited, and I'm not even kidding, to have this amazing panel today. We pulled this together in, I don't know, Mila will tell you in a second, just under a week. So I really appreciate these women and them coming here to share with you how brands can feature more Black voices. I'm really, I mean, we are obviously having a huge conversation about this in the culture, but even if we weren't, this would be an amazing panel to have. These people are powerhouses. I'm so excited to introduce them to you. Mila Clark Buckley, who is an influencer and food blogger. She is the Hangry Woman on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and everywhere you want to go. She makes amazing food, and she talks about type 2 diabetes and how to live with that. But in addition to that, she is a powerful, wonderful person who decided that she'd be happy to be the moderator for you today. So I am going to be sliding out of here, and I'm going to be in the comments with y'all. And I'm going to be writing notes. I'm going to be here just taking massive notes with my my notebook here. And I hope you guys do that same. At the end, now stay till the end. Make sure you do that, because at the end, Gika Richter, who is one of our longtime standing members of Social Media Breakfast, is going to do a few de-stressing exercises for us. So if you've been like staring at the screen for an hour, which we will have been by then, she's going to have these de-stressing exercises that she's going to teach us that we can be a little more helpful as we sit at our desks. So I'm really excited about today. I hope you guys are too. Make sure you give these ladies a lot of love in the comments. So I want to hear your comments. Let me know you're here. Tell me where you're at. Tell me what you're drinking. I'm having my chai tea. This is my morning coffee. My water. And yeah, you guys gotta do your water. Okay. What do you guys? Oh, you guys are so healthy. You guys are drinking water. Okay, good. Awesome. All right. So I'm gonna have to like peer pressure water. Okay.
Yay.
All right, great. Awesome. So I'm out of here. And I'll be back at the end to bring Gika on, but I'm very excited to introduce to you the panel.
Excellent. Thanks, Cami. Welcome, everyone, to Social Media Breakfast this month. As Cami said, I'm Mila Clark Buckley, and I'm here with this amazing panel of PR professionals and influencers who are talking to you today about how to include more Black voices in your creative, in your business, in your social media, all over the place. And we really have been having this conversation for a long time. I think everyone on the panel can attest to that. We have always talked about this. We've always talked about inclusivity, but kind of in the cultural context of this moment, it's something that's been brought to light again and in a bigger way. And so I wanted to start out by introducing the panel. We'll start with Erica. Tell us who you are, what you do, and why you're excited to be on the panel today.
Hi, I'm Erica Harrison. I operate the food blog Black Girls Who Brunch. In my real life, I am an attorney, and I actually work in diversity and inclusion. I'm a diversity officer at a university here in Houston. Wow. So diversity and inclusion has always been a passion for me, and this has been the convergence of all my worlds with the current climate, the food blogger world kind of erupting, and these discussions. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have this platform. As Mila hinted to, we've been talking about these kind of issues in GroupMe's for years, and so the fact that a broader audience wants to know and learn is exciting to me.
Absolutely. And Jasmine, what about you?
Hi, good morning. I'm Jasmine Woodard. I am the content creator behind Dash of Jazz, which is a food and lifestyle focused blog based here in Houston. I'm a native Houstonian, and by day, like Erica, I'm a diversity and inclusion strategy practitioner within the energy industry here. So this is really the convergence of two of my passions, my day job and my night job, so to speak. And it's kind of, I think, a perfect storm right now for this kind of conversation. I think Erica could probably attest to the fact that we've been kind of at a fever pitch with our work right now on the D&I side, at the same time receiving lots of attention and interest and engagement with the content that we create.
Absolutely. And Nell?
Hi, everybody. My name is Nell Reed, and I'm a PR and marketing professional. I've been in the industry for about 15 years. Currently, I am a communications advisor for Chevron. So a lot of the work that I do is advising executives on how to talk to their audience. But in several past lives, and even in my current life, a lot of work that I do is really working with bloggers to help them connect with brands. I've represented several brands throughout Houston and various other locations. So I'm more of the behind the scenes working with people like Erica and Jasmine and Mila. So thank you all for having me.
Awesome. And so we're just going to dive in with the first question. And I feel like any of you could take this question and run with it. But why now? Like, why are people giving attention to this issue at this particular moment in time? And what do you think makes it kind of like this top of mind idea for people in kind of the entire world?
In some ways, it's kind of reminded me of the Me Too movement. I think we'd had different times before where these issues had popped up, but I think that following the Me Too movement and then the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis Police Department, I think that has kind of sent a shockwave through the country where people are saying, okay, that these issues that perhaps we maybe were ignoring or not really discussing fully we can't ignore them, that they are continuing. And so I think at first it kind of started on the political justice side, and then it kind of pushed more into other arenas like the food blogger world. And I think a good example for us is that we were, there was this whole push to diversify your feed after what happened. And so people started following us that don't look like us for like the first time ever. And that was just kind of an interesting thing. And I think once that sparked, that sparked kind of more conversations about what does that look like, diversifying your feed and sharing the mic and all these other hashtags that have gotten popular over the last few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people started to see the inequity too. They started to see like, okay, I follow mostly white people, or I only pay attention to issues that are happening in my own community and I'm insulated. And now that I am being exposed to this and like through being at home with COVID and not really being able to think about anything else or having this ability to kind of like escape, quote unquote, like I think people started to dive deeper into these issues once they saw that it's not just one person calling it out or one person saying this is wrong. It's a whole collective of people that are saying, hey, this is my experience and it always has been. And now people are seeing that and starting to listen even more.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not sure if it was James Baldwin who said, but kind of once your eyes are opened to the real state of the world, the true state of inequity, you start to see it everywhere. So people are starting to notice things that they never noticed before. We were having an internal conversation at work just around Black people's last names. Like if you were born in this country for a number of generations, it's very likely that your family name is actually, was at some point the family name of the family that owned your family back in slavery. And so that was something that one of our executives was like, I never even considered that. And there are just so many different layers to racism, to oppression within our society that people take for granted, and they're suddenly noticing.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that I'll add is throughout the years, as you all have probably seen, brands have done a better job at social listening on social media. So it's almost as if consumers have turned brand into activists themselves. And you can't really post to this community without really addressing things that are going on in the community. And that's probably something that I'm happy to see on the PR side is we're really able to make connections with our audience and with content creators to talk about other issues.
Yeah. Could you talk about that a little bit more now, like in terms of PR companies kind of recognizing this need to listen and this need for diversity and kind of like how that's pivoting in the world toward influencers?
Yeah, I mean, it starts from a lot of different aspects. And when I talk about social listening, I'm really talking about people who track social media trends, listen to or look in the comments, think about what other influencers are discussing and kind of combinationing that with the news. Some of the other things that we do is what you start to see now more than anything is using CEOs as a big influencer for companies. I know when the George Floyd situation happened, you really saw CEOs in your inbox, and you probably have never seen that before. But that's something that we do to really enforce our support behind issues, and that's pretty much what it is. You can't just sell a box of cereal anymore. It doesn't work that way. You almost have to you have to sell the cabinets that the cereal box is going to go into. So we're really able to, because of social listening, we're really able to take deeper looks into how people respond to our brands and how people respond to our products.
Absolutely. And one of the big questions, and I think it really sets the context of why we're having this conversation, is that feeling of exclusion. And so, we mentioned before, we talked about how as like Black creators, we know that this goes on. This has happened to us for years. And we've kind of had to adapt to being left out of those conversations or left out of those rooms. And so I would love to kind of talk about those ways that we've adapted and how you all have created this ability to be included in those conversations, and maybe what other influencers can think about or do to avoid that.
So for me, this issue is rooted in one, the power of referrals, and then also affinity bias. So if we look at the relationships we have, a lot of times that's how opportunity is shared. So your neighbors, your friends, people that you choose to do business with. And because of the way our society is set up, more often than not, those are people who look like you. So if you think about who you want to give a deal to, or who you would like to share a resource with, you have to also consider the layer of affinity bias, which is basically a predisposition toward people who are like you. So then it takes an active effort to try to commune with or be in relationship with someone who isn't like you or who doesn't look like you. And then there are a whole bunch of other hurdles. So for that reason, as a Black creative, it's been really important to me to be in community with other Black creatives so that we can share referrals with one another and share resources and campaigns, things like that, that we become aware of, events, and then we're able to help bring other people in, both physically and within the digital sense. And I think it's really important for PR professionals and brands right now to be paying attention to those trends and tags that Erica mentioned at the beginning: diversify your feed, amplify Black voices, amplify melanated voices. Those are all hashtags that are going on social media right now, not only so that you can find Black creatives to engage with right now, but also to build out your network and your web down the road, because as we all know, the content that you interact with is really impactful on what more content the algorithms will feed you. So if you're only looking at a homogenous group, that's likely all you're ever going to see. But if you are trying to build up a pipeline of influencers and creatives that are diverse, not just for now, but for the future, it's a really good idea to start engaging with them now.
I will also say, I'll kind of call out the people we're talking to, PR folks. I think diversity within those agencies makes a huge difference as well. When I heard that Nell was going to be on this call, I was like, I have to tell this story. I do a lot of movie premieres now. Pretty much any Black movie in Houston I get invited to go to premiere and to give tickets to my followers. The first PR person that ever sent that to me was Nell. It was Nell, and so then Nell left that agency. The agency still calls me, so I have gotten in good with that agency because of Nell. Nell, a Black woman, saw the value in my voice as a Black woman and was like, we need to add her. And I mean, she sent me so many opportunities over the years, and it kind of got me in that space where I've been. You all know I go to pretty much every movie that comes out, and it's because of Nell. So that's one thing I would say. The other thing is we have had to build communication amongst each other to share opportunities. And Jasmine alluded to that, but a couple of years ago, I started a group called Black Blogger Click, which was, I started to see that within the Houston community, the Black bloggers, food bloggers were being omitted. I would go to events and I'd be the only Black blogger there, or I would see events that would happen, there wouldn't be a Black blogger there. And the problem with that is that, first of all, Houston is like 22% African American. And when you go into any place in Houston to eat out, you're going to see people who look like me there. And we talk about affinity bias, our followings are more likely to look like us. And so when you exclude a certain blogger or a certain media outlet, you're likely excluding that audience as well. which is kind of the unfortunate part there. Now, we should all follow different people for sure, but the reality of today is that we all have affinity bias. And so my followers are Black women. And so when you exclude an outlet like me, you also are excluding Black women from those kind of opportunities as well. So when we created that group, the most powerful thing that we've had is a group me. And in that group me, we'll share if we have opportunities. So like if we get invited to an event and they only invited one of us, like we're like the token diversity person for that event, I guess, but they gave us a +1. And so what we'll do is we'll invite another Black blogger to come with us. So then she also gets that same opportunity and can share and highlight what's going on, highlight that information on her feed, and then also can, I say her, but it's men and women too. They had the opportunity to go to the event, to highlight the event, and then also meet the PR people there as well, which that's kind of how we've networked that way. And it's kind of our little sneaky way around the exclusion that we've experienced in Houston is by working together. Then we'll share contact information as well, as Jazz said. We will share rates amongst our group as well. Just like kind of pulling back the veil to kind of share how we're making it through and sharing different tools and tips.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to add to that, also, like in talking about bringing people in and that communication, like I feel like every time I get some kind of outreach, I'm always asking who else is invited. If you're willing to tell me, I want to know who else is going to be in the room. And also here's a list of 15 other people that I think you should reach out to, just so you make sure that you cover all different areas. Like you don't exclude anyone, you don't leave anyone out. And that's always been really important to me because that's a way that I've gotten my foot in the door. Somebody said, hey, you need to talk to her. She's a great person to have on your panel, at your event, in your like writing a piece for you. And so paying it forward in that way and letting people know like there's an amazing group of people that you're leaving out. If you're only reaching out to me, you need to talk to them too. Has always been something that's really important for me in terms of just bringing people in. And Erica, you talked a little bit about that kind of like veil over the influencer industry, like how you get invited to things or how much you get paid for things, because it's just like a hard conversation to have. It's hard for people to talk about, but I think unveiling that and getting people to understand that there is, like, you do have a value as a creator and you have a unique perspective and a unique voice. And so you should be compensated for that voice, or you should be invited to these places to be able to share your voice and share with your audience kind of the uniqueness of whatever you're going to is something really important too. So I think that like connection has been really critical. I've noticed that like as we have all been kind of in this group, we have all gotten, I think, more unique opportunities and also have strengthened our voices and strengthened our kind of like our hold in Houston in terms of being top of mind when it comes to different things that are happening. So I think that's really powerful connection and something that's really important to kind of think about if you're a creator yourself and you're looking for that way to be able to branch out and do more. Find that group of people who are with you and stick together, because that's one way to get your foot in the door. Nell, I would love to hear from you if you have anything to add to kind of that conversation.
Okay. Yeah, I can talk about exclusion for a while. So I'll just start with a few points. But something that Erica mentioned that's really very important to remember is that, you know, when PR companies and sometimes marketing companies are reaching out to you, they more times than not, they're probably not going to be the most diverse audience. And I say that candidly. So it starts there first. And as you all are having, or as Black content creators are having more conversations about exclusion, we are also having conversations about why are you not letting more diverse, not just Black, diverse people into the door. So that's really important. But one of the things that I can probably say to other PR people or brands that are looking to do more inclusion efforts, it's really what Erica mentioned before, is if you find a blogger and, you know, the blogger doesn't look like the rest of them, then you really need to ask who are their friends, if they can recommend you to other people. And I think Instagram is really great about recommending other like-minded influencer. So that's been really helpful for me in the past. But I also think the other aspect too is on the PR side, we spend hours scouring through the internet trying to find who influencers are. And it's an incredibly difficult task because if you're working for an agency, you have to first find, the influencer, and then you have to talk to the company that you're representing about that influencer. So it's almost like, there's a round of vetting that goes through the process. And I'm just sharing that just in case, you all were wondering about, like, it's sometimes it's not the agency, sometimes it could be the brand themselves. But I think one of the things that I've done, particularly as a Black woman, is being vocal about those issues. And, we do it in various ways. I've typically take the polite route. And when I talk about Black content creators, I don't just talk about numbers, I talk about their audience. So a lot of times what we find in Black voices in particular is audience, community are vast. They're not going to just be in numbers. There may be a particular Black blogger who may be a part of the sorority, who may be a part of their church community, who may, be in another organization. And I feel like Black people have these large depths of community that, if you're on the outside looking in, you might not see. You may just see, 5,000 followers, but you don't, like, the minute that you post, whatever restaurant on her page, her church friends are going to go, her sorority members are going to go, her Jack and Jill friends may go. So that's the kind of picture that I tend to create when I'm talking about Black bloggers, is not necessarily thinking about, the hardcore numbers, but really creating those stories when we go through the vetting process.
Yeah, that's so important too, because I think a lot of brands look at just that number, like what's your Instagram following, and that's what you're stuck on. And you kind of have to think about that deep rooted community that's also behind what's just on that Instagram page or just on
sometimes numbers can be whack. I'll tell you that. They don't, I mean, these days people buy their numbers, so
that's so true.
Exactly.
So shifting the conversation a little bit, because I think we provided some really good context there for the audience, but there, especially in the past few weeks, have been just a lot of inappropriate responses to racism or accusations of racism, or kind of the way that brands operate and what they're going to do next. And so I kind of wanted to talk about what brands can do to respond better, and what they can do in this moment in time to kind of understand the community that is watching them, and understand what they can do to make sure that they are not just kind of like playing activist because it's the moment, but actually doing something for the rest of time, for the rest of the time that they exist. So I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
I have thoughts on this. If you follow me on Instagram, this has been my pet peeve. There's a term that we use for it. It's called performative activism. So if you posted a black box on Blackout Tuesday last Tuesday and didn't really have an action plan about what you're going to do to break down structures, to change your business, to make your business more inclusive, then in a lot of ways that's kind of hollow, and it becomes what we call performative activism. You're doing it for social clout. You're not doing it because you're aiming to change structures or change different things. And so a lot of Black people, or people in general, were having this thought of, I'm going to reach out to you to ask you, what are you doing beyond posting black boxes? And I think sometimes people get defensive about that, but the reality is that we are really analyzing where we spend our money at right now. And if you don't support the issues that I support, then I don't want to give you my money. And so when people are asking those questions, I think it's important not to get defensive, but to take it more as like, they want you to be better. They want you to make it past this purge of places that I can't go anymore. And so I actually did a whole post about it on my page. It's called, I'll link to it on my Instagram story again. I may share it on my Black Girls Who Brunch page today. But just sharing what brands should do. It's an easy step-by-step process. Cammie also shared it on her story. But there's a lot, like, you need to acknowledge the pain. You need to say thank you. You need to not get defensive. You need to also provide next steps. And if you don't have any, consider hiring a consultant. Other thing I've seen people say is, well, I have a diverse group. My restaurant's diverse. And Jazz and I will tell you, diversity is only one part of it. It is, diversity is numbers. We're looking for equity and equality. And if you're confused about what those things look like, consider hiring consultants to talk about how you can make things more equitable, create more access for people, and beyond just color. It could be also people with disabilities, veterans, a whole scope of different groups that are marginalized and often not included in these spaces. So I think I gave the quick rundown, but I think you have to take a moment and not get so defensive and recognize that, again, people are asking this because they want you to be great. They want to still continue giving you money.
Yeah,
I've canceled a couple places because of their responses, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I've definitely unfollowed and muted different brands on social media, but then beyond that, in the kind of beyond the digital space, as Erica mentioned, holding brands accountable is something that people are very interested in. We have the time because we're not leaving our houses anymore to fire off emails and sit on hold to hear what it is that you really have to say. I created an email template for people to send out to organizations that they do business with to basically get an idea of their viewpoint on Black Lives Matter, and then beyond that, what action steps they're taking to be part of the solution. And so many people have saved it, sent it, and sent me screenshots of like the responses that they got from brands to this email. And to that point, people really want to know, is it still safe to associate with you? Are our values aligned? And that's not anything new. People want to have, they don't want to have cognitive dissonance with where they're spending their money and who they're advocating for, and who they're associating with. So they want to know that there's some value alignment. This just happens to be a value that is coming to the forefront. It's a human rights issue, truly, and it's previously been characterized as like a political issue. And so people are bringing it to the light, bringing it to the forefront is something that they care deeply about, they're passionate about, and they want to know that the organizations that they spend their time and money with are in support of that, and if they're or if they're actively, kind of trying to undermine that. So I think that, for one, being open and listening, exercising some authentic humility is very important for the people behind brands and organizations to do. Right now, the black box was about muting and listening and trying to observe and learn rather than pushing out your own content. But it really is a process. There's a graphic going around showing a hill, and at the bottom of the hill was becoming aware of systemic racism. And then the real journey starts from there. You're going up the hill. There's a lot more work to be done. So this isn't just a moment in time. Because we have the global attention, I think people are really hoping that we're going to get systemic change that sticks this time. So people are very vocal about it. We're trying to keep this momentum and this energy going into the future. And so brands that are dragging their feet or wanting to kind of sit on the sidelines, or it's being really noticed, not just by influencers that might be looking to work with them, but people who are looking to shop and spend money. I've had followers of mine point out to me like, hey, I haven't heard anything from this company on the matter, or I asked this company in their comments and this was their response. What do you think? And none of us are like social justice influencers per se, but we are all Black women, so this is our lived experience, and we haven't had the luxury of not being informed on these issues. So we've kind of become de facto experts to our audiences in this moment in time. So I think it's really important, first and foremost, that brands listen and are willing to bring in diverse voices to provide that perspective that they're missing. When you look at a company that has an all white or all male or all white male executive team or board of directors, that speaks volumes, and it looks really bad, to be frank. So you have to get that perspective somewhere. Serena Williams' husband stepped down from his board position at Reddit and encouraged them to backfill it with a Black person. I know a lot of companies are not going to go to that extreme per se, but you have to really think about how you can bring diverse voices to your table, to your decision-making tables, not just like entry-level positions or one-time consultants.
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of brands are kind of at the very starting point of this. Like, they have never had to do anything but say, we're so sad that this situation happened, mute themselves for a day, and then move on to selling whatever they sell. And so a lot of feedback that I've gotten when I've asked, like, you know, what are you going to do beyond just posting the black box or saying nothing, is, well, I didn't know what to say. And that, I think, yeah, that response itself to me was like, you can say racism is bad. Like, that's all you have to say. You can figure out what you're going to do about it. But like, if just those few words mean so much to so many people. And by staying silent, you're almost complicit in perpetuating it, because people who do feel the opposite are going to be louder. They're going to be crazier about it. They're going to put out more about it. And if you sit on the sidelines and say nothing, you're almost supporting that voice. And so it's okay. Like, it was really interesting to me to have to sit there and say, like, it's okay for you to denounce this, or say that you don't believe in it, or say that it's upsetting to you. Like, that's not going to ruffle a feather. That's not going to make people mad. And if it does, like, are they the people that you want to be associated with? Like, if you say racism is bad and then somebody comes to you and says, like, well, I don't agree and I don't like that, do you want them to be like somebody who is aligned with you? And so that was like a really interesting thing to me to hear from like both like brands or friends and family who were just like, I didn't say anything because I didn't know where to start or what to say. And
yeah, I think that's fine.
I don't know what to say, but I'm listening and learning is what I think is a good way to say.
Yeah, I think. Oh, I'm sorry, Mila.
No, go ahead.
Oddly enough, I think George Bush probably said it the best when he wrote an op-ed about police reform. He basically said, "This is our time for listening," and I think that's probably the best advice that I can give any brand is first listen. That's the other aspect about social listening is you really need to listen, and you can't just follow the trend without expecting people to ask questions and provide feedback in that manner. I mean, I've seen a lot of back and forth with brands as well about, you know, the matter, but I think we also have to realize for brands, it's their first time in doing something like this. Like, when have you ever, Reebok, for example, when have you ever seen an organization just blatantly say, Black people are the reason why we're here? And I was like, oh, that's true. That's a very true statement. But I think as brands get more educated on the process, we probably will see more meaningful posts. I think it's a great job of what Erica and Jasmine have been doing is to continue to call that out. Please don't stay silent about that. If you see those types of things happening, call them out. I always appreciate it because that does allow me as a PR professional or a marketer to start the conversation to make things better.
Yeah.
I had a why really quickly, like why you should care. So we're talking about like why a random restaurant should care about being diversity and inclusion. So keep in mind how the George Floyd case started. He was accused of passing a bad check in a retailer in a shop. And so imagine if there's issue with implicit bias, presuming that people that he didn't have any money or whatever the case may be. That's how this whole incident sparked off. Similarly, think about the case that happened with the Starbucks in was it Philadelphia, and about how they were accused of not purchasing anything, of not really having a meeting, and the police came. Now that incident thankfully did not end in a murder, but they were arrested wrongfully. And so my point here is that don't think that you don't have a role in this system, because these businesses, these corporations, these restaurants, you all can be the starting point for when someone gets a bad interaction with the police that leads to these kind of cases like George Floyd. So that's kind of how all of our roles, how we all kind of play into this system, which is why I think it's important that businesses are thinking about diversity and inclusion, thinking about implicit bias, affinity bias, all these different things, and how they organize their businesses, because I think it makes a huge difference. The little small example is like Walmart has been putting ethnic products, the hair products that we all use on our hair, behind glass. You have to go get a person to get a key to get shampoo out. And it's they do this everywhere. I mean, not everywhere, but they do it in a lot of places, especially in Black communities. And so they come out that they're going to stop doing that. It's dehumanizing to think that you have to go get someone to unlock a case to buy some shampoo.
Mm-hmm.
that's formulated for your hair.
Yeah. And those kind of issues run so deep. Like they're not just, and it's really interesting because that example specifically, Erica, I posted on Twitter the other day, and there were probably like 10 people who were not Black who commented on my post, and they said, I don't ever see that happening. And I was like, go to any like Walmart, CVS, Walgreens in the hood, and you will see the hair care, the dark makeup behind those cases. And it's on purpose. Like it's not because they just felt like, oh, those were the ones we should do. It's for a very specific reason and a very specific thought process by the companies that do that. And so it's one of those things that's like an awareness, like you notice it when you're the person who has to go get the associate to go get it. But if you can just pull your shampoo right off the shelf, you don't ever notice that maybe there's another section that is off limits or behind glass for other people. So it's a really interesting perspective shift, I think, in people that haven't been able to see it before are now kind of seeing like, okay, this actually does really happen. It's not just people complaining about nothing.
Mm-hmm. And Mila, I wanted to follow up to something you mentioned earlier about brands or even individuals not wanting to say anything or not wanting to, being worried about making people uncomfortable. Because this is something that I shared with a colleague the other day, but we're really at a pivotal moment in history where you have to get on one side or the other, really be on the right side or the wrong side of history. And part of what a lot of companies and organizations will have to reckon with in the very near future is what kind of culture and tone they want to set internally, and be willing to say goodbye to some people. You should be working to develop a culture within your organization that makes racists uncomfortable. You should not have a permissive culture where people feel like they're going to get the benefit of the doubt or a pass for mistreating someone. That, the same applies for your friendships or who you choose to associate with. This is the time to send a very strong message and to create an environment, whether that is your personal friendship circle or that's your professional association circle or within an organization that you have power in, to set a tone that this is what we stand for. And you can't really change hearts and minds with business, but you can set the expectation that people behave in alignment with certain values. And if they don't, then they know where the door is.
Yeah. And as we've seen, people have been shown the door in the past week. The editor of Bon Appetit magazine was ousted from his position because he created a culture of animosity toward people of color. They didn't really employ Black people in positions in their test kitchens or pay their employees like on par with each other for appearing in videos or not. We saw that one of the editors of the New York Times, the op-ed editor, was also pushed from his position for allowing kind of a very tense article to kind of pass and be published. And so I think that's a really important thing to note, Jazz. Thanks, that, it's important to hold people's feet to the fire. And now that we have their attention, and yeah, the editor of Refinery 29, she was another one that left her position because of the culture that was created. And yeah, it's important. Like, it shows that people being comfortable enough to be able to speak up about what's happening in their workplace and consumer pressure kind of gets people to take action and make it better. So I think it's really important for us all not to stop here just because the headlines are dissipating and we're not seeing it as much in the news. Like, it's an everyday process from here. And it creates change. It really does. So I think that's really important to note. We have one more question. So we talked about what brands can do, but I would love to talk a little bit explicitly about what brands should not do in this situation, because people have a hard time knowing what to do, but they also don't know what not to do and what things are inappropriate in this kind of time period. So I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
So I think one thing that you should not do is engage in tokenism. So that is not something that is specific to brands, but you've heard the token woman in a situation or the token Black friend. So that pulling out your Black middle manager in your company when you have a fully white or other POC executive leadership team, but elevating this one person up to say, you know, I've had a great experience here, or, you know, it's not as racist as other places, it could be worse. Like, that's illustrating actually the problem. It's not making anyone that is truly invested in the issue feel at ease. It's just kind of putting a Band-Aid over something. So yeah, I think it can be almost a knee-jerk reaction as to, oh, well, let's get this person up to speak, or let's get our diversity person up to speak, when really this is something that everyone, as Nell mentioned, the CEO should be invested and involved in, and speaking out against, not just someone who this is part of their job accountability or this is their lived experience because they're a person of color. Everyone at the company from the top to the bottom should be equally invested in this and equally informed about it. So if diversity and inclusion have been parts of your company but have not been embedded in your operations and your accountabilities, your bonus structures and things like that, now is the time to really examine that and bring it to center stage, to the mainstream focus, so to speak.
I would say don't send nasty emails. There is a restaurant in Houston that sent one of my followers the nastiest email ever. And I had to share it because I just cannot believe they would do that. Other thing is don't seek validation. One thing that really irritates me is when companies are like, look at all the things I've done for Black people. And I'm like, okay, but we still are in this process. Like there's more to be done. So don't list out the things that you've done and it's like, praise me. It's annoying. I have this whole page, I call it, and they all know, I call it No Gold Stars. So I make it a point when people are, when allies are posting about things they're doing, which are great things, I make it a point not to like or comment, because I think sometimes people are seeking validation and I kind of want them to fester and kind of figure it out. Like that sounds mean, but my goal is to like let them sit in this space and kind of figure out if I'm doing it right, because they're seeking validation from me, a person of color, to say that you're a different kind of person. You're not racist. And I can't do that. I can't carry that burden. That's work for me. And it's just not right. I think that everyone has to do their work, and you have to, if you feel like you're not really sure, it probably is more work to be done. There's always more work to be done, to be quite honest. So don't seek validation. If you start listing out what you've done before, it'll come off very hollow and people will see through it, and guarantee you'll start saying all these different things, and there'll be a person of color that works in your department or works that business of like, but that time that I came and asked for a raise, if someone's gonna put you on blast. So be very careful about that. And the thing I think to keep in mind is never think that your environment's perfect. Even minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses have issues. I think that we can all strive to make things more inclusive of all different groups. And so if you think that your work is, I think that's part of the thing that they shouldn't do, is don't think your work is done. No one's work is done. We are constantly this is my lived experience, but I'm constantly having to read and learn and get new terminology for all these different things. So don't think that your work is done, especially if it's not your lived experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also something that is just general good practice in social media and PR is don't just block people who are being critical of you. Like, actually take their criticism to heart, because there's a reason that they're sitting there typing up an answer, giving you feedback about the way that you've approached things. And it's not enough to just say like, your comment doesn't exist to me, I'm going to delete it and I'm going to block you from my page and I'm never going to talk to you again. Because you don't know what connections that person has. You don't know if they bring their family to your restaurant or your place of business like every single day and they are like a diehard fan of yours. And you don't want to alienate people who can help you, like people who are actually willing to help. So I think it kind of goes in conjunction with Erica's comment about like don't get defensive. Like, people are willing to help you and willing to talk to you. And if you're getting defensive, that's also something you should examine in your business practice overall. You know, why does it get to you that badly that that's the action that you take?
And I think, Mila, what I can probably add to that is something PR people are infamous about doing is we love to ignore and think that the problem will go away, you know, because that's just a thing that you can just do is ignore people. But sometimes, I mean, well, typically all the time, these that one time that you ignore an issue, it can really become an actual fire. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just not ignoring, and what you all have mentioned before is, reaching out to people and providing and getting that feedback so that you can do better the next time, that you can take a learning opportunity. I think in some of the instances I've seen where brands have done the wrong thing, I think the best thing could have been is really to partner with a Black content creator and amplify this more. Like the place in question could have really reached out to anyone and maybe have done a Facebook Live to talk about ways that they can make their environment more inclusive. I think the biggest thing is probably bringing people in, that can talk about the issue better than you might be able to. So that's something that I would probably suggest.
Yeah. And then one last question before we start to take questions from the audience. I would love to hear one piece of advice from all of you on something that a brand can take away from this conversation or do better as they kind of start on this journey.
This is very simple, but I think one thing that is so important is to validate the impacted party. So statements like people of color or other euphemisms are offensive to us because it does not call out the impacted party in this moment. And the impacted party in this moment is Black people, full stop. There's no other group that experiences police violence in the way that Black people in America do. And so if you're going to make a statement, it has to be full-throated and it has to call out the impacted party. I cringe when I see a people of color or some people in our community. You have to call out the impacted party. And that could be if the incident impacts LGBTQ, call that out, but don't say like marginalized groups. Don't put this this broad strokes with it, because if you do that, you're putting us all together, and you are not acknowledging the really different history that these different groups have and experience, and how we experience America. So that's one thing I would say that I've been talking about it at work. I've been talking about it on social media. I just truly acknowledge and validate the party that's impacted by whatever is going on.
Mm-hmm.
I can go next, just in terms of advice for brands and PR people as well. I think that one of the biggest thing is you really need to build relationships with Black content creators beyond just using them for the moment, and helping them to build up their brands, because obviously they are looking for help and for guidance. So some of the things that I used to do early on, particularly when I didn't have a lot of budget, is I would partner with a larger brand. I don't know if my friend Crystal Howard with Kroger is here, but I probably have called Crystal a number of times to just see if there's a linkage here. We might not be able to have a big budget, but at least I can connect you to a larger brand, and we PR people on the back end can work to help amplify your voices. And I think the next piece of advice is really realizing that these issues about race or ignoring diversity at this point is irresponsible. It's always been irresponsible, but just knowing that more people are going to call you out about it, and you need to have not necessarily a response or a black box, but you need to have a plan of action into how you're going to integrate and work with this community.
One takeaway from this that I think is important for brands to take note of is related to something that Nell referenced, which is as Black creators, our audiences are typically really, really highly engaged with us and extremely loyal, and that goes back to representation. So representation is something that's really important when we're talking about marginalized communities. In this case, we're talking about the Black community, and for us specifically, we represent Black women. So to our audiences who are really highly aligned with us, typically look like us for the most part, we are not just simply like a feed aesthetic. They're typically following us because we embody representation for them. Historically, the media has not had accurate or balanced portrayals of Black women, and American history is typically typically revisionist. So we're not getting the full picture in school or out when we're watching TV and things like that. So it's really important for Black people to see ourselves portrayed in a very full, positive way in media, and that includes social media. So even if you're working with a Black nano or micro influencer, you would be really surprised by the return on investment that you can get by working with them and paying them, because our audiences, we really are typically in lockstep, we as Black people, with our influencers, our celebrities, our Black public figures. And so we're really, and from a consumer standpoint or a follower of someone, we understand the power of representation and we want to see them win. We want to see more Black influencers rise up. So don't discount Black content creators of any size. I think it's really important to examine the way that you're casting and scouting and sourcing for these campaigns, and talk and engage with us to see what we can do to help you reach those goals. And then back to the other point is to pay us. We've all seen the influencer pay gap stuff, and it's coming to light. Pay equity is an issue across the board, not just within the influencer industry, but our industry is younger and it's notoriously exclusionary and not very transparent. Hasn't been that way over time. So with all the information that's coming out, it's painting a pretty clear picture, and you don't, again, want to be on the wrong side of that. So pay Black influencers their work.
Absolutely. And then I think that my takeaway would be just to examine all levels of your organization and what you're doing, and don't just do it as performative activism. Like, do it because you actually care, because you actually want to change, and because you want to make things different. I always am so disheartened by situations like George Floyd's, where it's literally a headline for a week or 2 weeks, and then after that we forget about it until the next one. And it's my hope that we don't. It's my hope that this remains on our consciousness over time, so that change does get to happen, and that we actually see a more equitable society, a society that's more open and respectful to Black people and people of color, and that we are doing this for the reasons of change. We're doing this because we want to see it be different for our kids, our grandkids, and people who live on after us. So I love y'all's advice. It was so great to hear. And I think it's really helpful for those brands who are looking for what to do and how to be more inclusive after this moment, not just during it. And so I think with that, we'll take some questions. I saw some questions.
I'm sorry, I just have one more comment. I'll be 2 seconds short. I forgot to mention it.
Of course.
So in a lot of my research within the PR and marketing industry, I think one of the important things to know is a lot of organizations are obviously cutting their marketing budget. So what we're starting to look at now is, instead of spending $50,000 on an advertisement for 3 seconds, word of mouth marketing is important. So I'm happy to see that Black content creators are getting their visibility, because I strongly believe that more Black content creators will be contacted and reached out to. So I would start to get prepared and get ready, because we're looking for people who can talk to their community, as opposed to us, buying out an ad. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's awesome. And perfectly said. So anyone have any questions? I can see some here. Let's see. So Isabel asks, how do you personally feel about the term BIPOC? Is it a term that distracts or validates? And I see y'all all smiling. So
Girl. Can I be honest? I work in diversity and inclusion, and the first time I heard this term was this week. I was like, what is this? I was so confused. I had to go to Google. Had you heard it before, Jasmine?
Not before the last 2 weeks.
It's new to me. There are moments where I think the use of people of color is fine. I typically go with marginalized groups, because I feel like that is inclusive of other groups that are also marginalized, like LGBTQ and disabled persons. So I do that. I don't think it distracts. But again, I think my whole point here is that you cannot group together people of color, because a couple things within those groups, there are prejudices that go on. I saw someone mention in the comments about the challenges between the Asian community and the African American community. That's a long history there as well. So when you do that, you're dismissing that point, because we're not all the same, and you're also dismissing our histories. We all came to America in different ways. I mean, my people came here on slave ships. Others came here after fleeing war. Others came here, by willful immigration. You're ignoring all those different stories. And so that's why I typically use marginalized groups is what I use, or I use what Title VII includes. I'm a lawyer, sorry. I use what Title VII includes in terms of classes that are protected with our Civil Rights Acts.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I would say the same.
Awesome. And then Casey asks, thoughts on how companies can address these issues right now with the added challenge of working virtually?
I can answer this question. I think the added challenge of working virtually, it's super difficult right now. I can give you an example of something that we actually did at Chevron shortly after the George Floyd situation happened. We have basically what's called diversity networks. So the Black Employee Network had a virtual conversation for the entire company, not just Black people, to voice their concerns. And a lot of people left feeling very therapeutic about that, because, again, this is the first time we, Black people, myself, people on the call, we've been able to really voice our concerns about race. I think a lot of people are looking for that outlet, but then at the same time, a lot of people are looking for opportunities to learn. So I would use these virtual platforms as an example. And then, if you can safely give resources for employees to go out and do things where they can contribute to organizations to make things better, I think that would probably be ways that I would recommend doing it virtually.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's important to cascade down messaging from the top that leadership, so your middle managers, your frontline managers and supervisors, are expected to be having conversations about this within their teams, because we know that someone could have a very favorable opinion of the broader culture of their company, but have a very different or very nuanced experience with their direct manager, director, supervisor. And so this is the time, like I said, to be driving that culture that you want to see, that culture of inclusion at your company, and be transparent that this is something that we care about, cascade it through email on your company intranet site, and send messages to people leaders that, the expectation is that you have these discussions and leave this room for your employees to talk about this at your next team meeting, or send an email check-in to all of your direct reports. I think that's a very easy way, even though we're virtual, to keep those lines of communication open, set the expectations for leaders, and also give employees some confidence in how much you care about this issue.
Remember that we are coming back to camp. You're coming back to your job at some point. And so if you let this fester, people are over here mad or thinking about they haven't done anything about this in my job yet. They're coming back to your office space a little upset. So you have to address it and do something, whether it's a town hall or whatever, to, again, you have to address the impacted party. And the other, everyone's impacted by this, whether you are an ally or whatever. And so I'm also hosting an event in my job next week. We've been working on for the last week, because we're like, we can't ignore this and let it fester.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Jenny said, I'd love to better understand how to balance active listening with speaking out. How much talking is too much talking, and how much listening is too much listening? I guess I'm wondering, how do followers know that we're listening if we don't say it?
So I shared this on my feed a couple of weeks ago, and this is probably going to be shocking to some people. I was at a training a couple months ago, and this woman shared that how we're conditioned in America, and that white men are often conditioned to be told that people care what they think, and that they're conditioned that, and we all play a part in that conditioning. If you walk into a room, there's a diverse group sitting here, you may all presume that the white man is the leader or the man is the leader in the room. We all take a part in that. And that that white women are conditioned to think people care about how they feel and their feelings. And so I note that because I think, and I'm not saying that that's the case for everybody, but I note that because I think that plays into a part about this whole listening and balancing that and in the validation thing. I think the key thing here too is that when we don't want to center allyship around the ally. And so when we talk about listening and being active listeners, what we're saying is that don't take up space. Share the mic with people of color to share their lived experiences, because what happens is there's allies that are doing great work, but they often want to be in the forefront. And so that conditioning plays a part in why that happens. And so I think it's a good balance of kind of stepping back and perhaps asking questions, but not centering it around yourself is what I would say. If you find that you may be taking up space for somebody else that may be more of an expert, I think that can be a challenge there. And I really feel like that all of us, I think that all of us probably should be doing more listening than talking, and that includes people of color. This is just a moment to learn, to hear about other people's experiences, to grow as people, to grow in all of our understanding of diversity and inclusion. And so, if you have to ask the question, "Am I talking too much?" Other than a panel like this, you may be talking too much, and you may have to kind of sit back and listen. But again, I make the point about the white ally part here because I think with good intentions, sometimes white allies come in and center themselves around the issues. A good example is Robin DiAngelo, who wrote the book White Fragility, which is now once again topping the New York Times. You don't see Robin everywhere, do you? You don't see Robin saying, "Make it about me." Robin's kind of chilling. Like I've seen a couple interviews with her, but she's not everywhere because she's not centering the conversation around her. She's doing her work on the back end, but you don't see her in this pushing her narrative and her story out to the forefront in this conversation. I hope that makes sense. And I hope it wasn't offensive. I always weird when I give that conditioning note there, because I don't want to offend anybody, but just something I learned that I've seen play out in different situations.
Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? All right, cool. So we'll move on to Erica's question. Another Erica. I teach PR and advertising at Moody College of Communications, UT Austin. What are your suggestions for educators of future communicators?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think one of the biggest things that you can talk about is you have to teach them different marketing strategies onto how to connect with diverse voices. I went to Howard, so obviously a lot of my background was in working with Black communicators, so I'm very good on the foundation of how to do that. But I think when I started to go into the workplace, I think that some of my colleagues may have had this impression that certain audiences couldn't afford things, or they couldn't grasp the concept that there's just a life outside of themselves. So I think that exposing them to the diverse work of Black communicators or issues within all races should be very sufficient. And I don't have a book just yet that I can recommend, but I think the mere exposure should be sufficient.
And I think that's true of kind of any person who's being educated. Like, you educate yourself to expand your worldview. And so if you're just looking at the kind of like straight path that you're on, the path that kind of only speaks to your experience, you're not really doing much for you in terms of expanding your mind, expanding your worldview. So I think as an educator, it's really important to encourage people to get outside of themselves and to learn more, because it takes them out of their comfort zone, out of kind of like the textbook, what they know, that one kind of like path that they should go on, and gets them to kind of see things outside of their own view, which makes them more creative in the end. And I think ends up making them also think about inclusivity in a different way.
Yeah, and I think it's important to provide as much as you can for all educators, like the right historical context. So if you are developing a curriculum or a syllabi for a class that you're teaching, and the default, the mainstream view is like the white male view, and it's very US and Western centric, but we all know that that's not the extent of the world. And even I think as me as a Black woman, like I didn't at the time recognize the inadequacies of the education that I got up through grad school. A lot of the learning that I did was adjunct to that and outside of the classroom and through self-study and lived experience. And it's impossible to know it all, but the more that you are able to bring diverse perspectives and diverse voices into the classroom, into the materials that you're selecting and pushing forward, the better of a picture the students are able to paint, and they're able to better think critically and question and push back against things that are not right, because they can see that it's not right, rather than going through the world with blinders on and just accepting the status quo and thinking that, oh, well, this is the way it is because it's the way it's always been, so it must be right, rather than actually being investigative and thinking critically and being able to examine things from a different point of view.
Can I also add, Erica, so I work in higher ed also, and one of the things I do is and if you email me, it's info@blackgirlswhobrunch.com. I will send this to you. It is a chart to analyze your group. And what you do is you identify, it's an identity wheel. You identify where you fall, Black, woman, heterosexual, all those different things. And then you go and analyze all your friends, your top 10 friends that you talk to, no family, but friends. And you look and see, do they fit all the same different things, identities as you? So if your circle looks just like you, you're learning how to communicate just how you communicate. You're not learning anything else beyond that. And so we started doing that with like our freshmen and our sophomores and trying to encourage them to diversify and learn about different people while they're in this very diverse space at our university, so they can learn more and perhaps learn different like nuances. So I went to a more diverse high school. I learned about Ramadan as a kid. So I knew that those nuances there when it came to that kind of that religion. To being a Muslim. And it's a very simple thing, but I think if you don't know those kind of simple things, you may send an email to somebody during Ramadan asking they want to come to a food tasting and not know how inappropriate that could be.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I would tell them like that now at 18, 19, 20, it's an opportunity to start analyzing their group and diversifying their friend groups and who they work with to learn more, because you're going to learn through trial and error before someone's paying you to have to communicate with a certain group.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I think one thing that I'll add really quickly, and I had a brain fog, tends to happen with quarantine, but incorporating lessons from history. So I think I'll just give an example. The civil rights movement is a great communications history, because you have how people were able to use television to showcase what was happening with Black people. You had Black newspapers who were reporting on those issues. So I think if you can take those examples, it'll probably make things real life for your students, so they can understand the gravity of what took place and use communications to help teach that. So that's one little thing to add. Sorry.
There is a book. It's called The Race Beat.
That's what I was looking for.
The Race Beat. I can't think of who wrote it. I have it downstairs, but it's called The Race Beat. And it's about how pivotal it was in the movement for those different those Black newspapers around the country.
Perfect. Cynthia asks, any ideas on how to spark the conversation with your company? I work in HR, and for some reason, management has decided to remain silent. I want to call them on it. Any advice on how?
I did that at work. I'm in diversity and inclusion. We're embedded within the HR function at my company. So I feel like I personally tend to get a pass for bringing up these kinds of things because it is the work that I do. But in the absence, so you could certainly link up with the D&I professional at your job if you have one, if you have a relationship with them. But also, from a broader perspective, HR also tends to get a pass as well, because we're looked at as like the softer side of the company, or we're more people focused. So I think you can certainly just send an email or make a phone call to someone higher up, but that you have a direct line to. In my case, I reached out to my director, and she brought it up with our executive leadership team. and I was actually able to help them develop and craft the messaging and the approach, and develop a sustained strategy over time to make sure our company is playing a role in being part of the solution. And so I think you can just ask. I'm not sure what the culture or climate is like at your company, if there's a specific reason you're aware of as to why they're choosing to stay silent. But in the absence of, like, an extremely embroiled racist culture, I don't think there should be too much negative blowback from just simply posing the question. And you can speak, from the perspective of an employee. I don't know if you said that if you're a Black person or not, but the perspective of an employee. I work here. This is how I feel, in this current point in time. And as, an employee at this company, it's important to me that we do X, Y, Z or say X, Y, Z. And I'm curious as to if we're going to say something, and if not, why not? If you've heard, I think it can be more powerful if you have heard from other employees who feel the same, regardless of color, so that you have a larger voice. You can say, not just it's my experience, but I've had the same experience and spoken to other employees who are also curious.
I would really encourage you to provide data to support it. If you work in HR, you have the data. So then you can see if there's been 4 cases about discrimination at your department, then I would share that. If there have been, if I would say, these are the kind of issues that we're seeing. If you've gotten complaints from other people, I would share that. But provide them with your knowledge and specifics to that company. If it's higher up folks, they may not know, they may not be aware of that we've had 5 cases about race issues over the last few months. If they know that, then there's a push for change, because ultimately those kind of things become bigger issues when we have these kind of movements happen as well.
Yeah, and I think I'm probably into the why they're silent. Sometimes companies are silent because they have some race issues that they might not want to be broadcasted. And that's, for me as a PR person, that's probably what I'm thinking about. But there's backlash there now. I mean, silence really is, again, it's irresponsible. So which is better, the backlash that you're going to face for speaking out, or the backlash that you're going to face for being silent? But I would probably encourage them to be silent. Hopefully there are no legal issues that are taking place for why they don't feel comfortable, going forward.
Yep. And then I want to take this question from Nisi, because this is a real world example. I think it speaks to the brand side of it. And I think that I think any of you could answer this question. It's directed to Nell, but I think all of you might have a perspective on this. And it's from a PR perspective on how Starbucks handled the Black Lives Matter issue. So they've backtracked from saying, so originally Starbucks said you can't wear Black Lives Matter stuff while you're at work. Like, absolutely not. But they let people wear all kinds of things: American flags, LGBT flags. They support all kinds of movements. But now they've backtracked and they created a T-shirt after they were called out for the memo that they sent to their partners, telling them not to wear anything associated with Black Lives Matter. So from like a practical perspective, how could they have handled this better? I think it's also important to note that I think it was about a year ago, Starbucks had an incident in one of their stores where 2 Black men came in for a meeting. One of them went in to use the restroom like before his partner got there. The barista called the police on him, and then there was like this whole thing. He was arrested, detained, like it just became this whole thing. And then Starbucks decided, okay, we're going to do more diversity and inclusion trainings to make sure that people have the knowledge to not do that to anybody ever again. And then this kind of happened. So with that context in mind, about like Starbucks history, what do you guys think is something either that they could have done differently or better? Or what do you think about that whole situation and kind of how they've handled it?
Go ahead, Nell.
Well, I mean, it's always, this is such a hard discussion because Starbucks has a Black COO, Rosalind Buer, and she's done an amazing job about speaking up about matters of race. And the only thing that I can think of is, Starbucks is a brand themselves. It's not like they're bringing in Black Lives Matter as a partnership. So that's the only justification that I can give them. But I definitely think that they could have handled it better, especially during these times right now. I mean, people aren't even going out to get coffee alone, let alone trying to figure out if people have on Black Lives Matter gear. But I think one of the ways that they could have addressed it, not necessarily with tokenism, but using Rosalind to speak about that voice. Like, I think it would have been really powerful if we would have seen videos from her really talking about her experience in race. She's done it several times before, and I think it's a very powerful message. But to deny employees to speak out on these issues when they've clearly done it in other opportunities, then I think there's some level of being irresponsible there.
I will say that when you have been called on an issue like this before, you don't have the chance to mess up when it becomes a bigger issue. You should have had different drafts and different game plans about how you handle this when it happens. And I'll give a personal example. I went to University of Missouri. 5 years ago, University of Missouri was the hot button place for campus unrest related to racial issues. George Floyd happened. University of Missouri did not have any statements. I sent an email to their CEO saying, "What are y'all doing? Y'all don't have that luxury. Every other university has already come out and made a statement. You all should be the first. You should have several in the drafts ready to go. You had this happen to you before. You should be ready for this." And my other thought was, this is what I assumed. Starbucks is closing down a record number of stores. They have been hit hard by COVID. People not getting in the cars and going to the store. They're not buying Starbucks. And so what I presumed is that, this is just me guessing, one of your emergency workers, police officers, are still patronizing Starbucks and those kind of places. And so what I thought was they were trying to ensure that they could keep the business that has kind of kept them afloat during the quarantine. That was just my assumption.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say to your point, Nell, Starbucks has been very vocal on other issues. And if we're thinking about just right now at this point in time, it's Pride Month. Starbucks observes Pride every year. They have shirts, I believe, for their partners during the month of June as well. And they, I don't know the branding term to it, but they kind of share their branding with different logos and different symbols of different important human rights issues and campaigns that we see. Black Lives Matter being one that's really strongly in focus right now. It was just so surprising to me that they not even just missed, but denied this opportunity to display alignment and address even something that, I mean, as we said, it's a human rights issue, but also perhaps it really isn't necessarily an employment issue for them, because unemployment is at an all-time high. So they could probably, replace anyone that chooses to leave because of this. But it was just not just a missed opportunity, but quite frankly, like a denied opportunity, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing, is like, we as consumers, we're literally looking for brands to speak out. I think now I'm in the habit of, before I go someplace, I check to see if they've mentioned anything about racism. It doesn't matter wherever I go. I could be, just going to get a soda or something. I'm going to check on whoever's page that is to see if they've spoken out about George Floyd. But one of the things I think PR people may have a hard time doing, myself included, is the mindset of being agile and being able to respond quickly to what's going on in the real world, if you will. I mean, you kind of set your year for the entire. You set your year like in January, so all these different plans that are taking place. So when things like racial injustice happen at this mega scale, it's really hard to adapt. But we have to get out of that mindset of, well, it's June, I'm doing Pride Month now. It's almost like we're set up as robots, and we have a hard time adjusting and responding to issues. So I'll just add that one other thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think there was another question. Val asked if we have any tips. This kind of goes back to bringing up issues at hand to companies. Do you have any tips for how to include Black coworkers in HR or in creative efforts without making them feel burdened by being asked?
I think one is to make it kind of more forum style, so you can send out a survey or you can send out a call for input or opinion, not just simply tapping the Black person that you know on their proverbial shoulder to say, hey, what do you think about this? That gives people the opportunity to provide input or to raise their hand and say, hey, I'd like to help out with this issue. And they can self-select, because it is emotionally taxing to be a Black person in the working world. It just is, specifically in corporate America, and that's just on a regular day. Especially right now, it can be very draining, and it's a particularly sensitive and emotional time. A lot of an adjective that I've been hearing a lot of Black professionals use to describe how they feel right now is tender. Like you feel like you've been struck, you've been hurt, and it's not a new strike. It's the same spot that you've been hit over and over. So it's really sore and fresh right now. And sometimes you might have taken a painkiller and you're able to get through a meeting or an engagement and put on a brave face, and then you might be crying on your lunch break. So I think that's an easy way to solicit feedback without, like you said, burdening or putting the onus on someone directly to say, hey, can you respond to this right now? But giving them time. Another thing that I recommend, if your company has them, is employee resource groups. These are people who have already raised their hand to say, I'm interested and I am committed to helping our workplace be more inclusive, be more reflective, be more open, whatever it may be. And they are generally centered around some affinity or some identity with a marginalized group, whether that's women, whether it's your Black employee group or your LGBTQ group. So they have that lived experience that by default gives them some level of subject matter expertise, and of course being an employee at your company. So I think tapping them is also a good way.
I would consider doing surveys and providing a way to provide anonymous feedback where people are able to provide just kind of what their concerns are without having to do extra work. There is a burden on Black people in America. Like there's one of the popular tweets right now is that how many of you all got extra duties this week after all these issues? Now, this is my job in the regular, so that wasn't an issue for me. But for companies that have not hired people for these kind of roles, they've had to now find somebody within their structures to do that. So I think one thing is to consider ways that can provide feedback where it's not an extra burden to them, and that you look at hiring people to help handle those different things. And again, and hire people. If you're looking for ways to get them involved, consider hiring diversity and inclusion specialists, consider hiring consultants, consider paying someone to do this work, consider paying your employees, providing stipends for them to do this extra work. Hey, we really want to do a program. We're looking at we want to do X, Y, Z. We prefer to have someone that's already works here. We're going to pay you X amount of dollars to do it, and doing it that way. But no, there's a burden on Black folks in the workplace, and people are not wanting to pay for this burden. So I think if you can find a way to fund it, and it'd probably be cheaper to give a stipend to an employee than to hire a whole new employee. That may be a way to creatively incentivize making this, or it's not really a burden to them, so to speak.
And I will add to that, like, as a person who has been asked 1,000 times in the workplace, and granted, like I work for myself now, so it's different, but when I did work in like a corporate structure, I would be asked to take surveys all the time, and I would do them, and I felt like I gave up my valuable time and my energy to do them, and then there was never any follow-up on the survey. They didn't tell me what the next phase was or what the next plan was or what they were going to do with the information. So I think be really transparent about that as well, so that people feel like the time that they did spend is valued and they'll keep wanting to give feedback, and also have some kind of like plan in place to essentially tell them, like, here are the next steps. Here's what we heard from you. Here's what we understand from you. And here's what we're going to do next, so that people know that they're actually being heard and not just kind of sending an answer into a void.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So we have about 5 minutes left. There was one question from Isabel that I really like. So she said, in a climate of cancel culture, what are ways that brands who have shown racism or biases can prove that they have authentically changed or are actively trying to change? And I think this goes back to no gold stars, but for companies who have kind of shown that they haven't been on board and now they finally are, what are some ways that they can show that the change is authentic and that they're actually doing something meaningful?
I think being transparent about what that is. So just having a change of heart or making a statement isn't, really demonstrating anything yet, especially I think right now, because as Nell has said a couple of times, it's irresponsible at this point, or it's noticeably irresponsible to not be saying anything. And it's, extremely problematic to be speaking kind of against this movement in the public sphere. So coming out and saying something is the first step, but it doesn't actually demonstrate anything to like a consumer from that point of view or to the public. So having a plan in place and communicating that plan in place, being transparent about it. One company that comes to mind right now is Ford. So I think probably many of the influencers on here would be aware, but maybe not everyone, that they are an influencer marketing agency. Essentially, they connect influencers with brands, and as the middleman, they of course take a cut. And they've been viewed as a pretty progressive company in that sphere. The CEO is charismatic and really outspoken, but they have been called out by kind of a coalition of Black influencers about pay discrepancies, ignoring feedback over the years, a lack of diversity within their own ranks. I think they only have 2 Black employees that people know of out of hundreds, and just not being as progressive or, down for the causes they portray themselves to be. And so in response the demand from these influencers has been transparency, and has delivered that. Now, I haven't gone through the different specifics to know if they've answered the exact questions that these influencers have asked, but what they are doing is sharing the numbers and providing timelines to the commitments that they're making. So by the end of June, we will have this and that in place. And here's also the checks and balances that we will have on that to ensure it's sustainable over time. Here's the current makeup of our board. Here's our commitment to diversify the board. Here's the date by which we commit to reaching that goal. So whatever you have changed within your organization, you have to be able to quantify and illustrate that and share it. Because one of the biggest, I think, obstacles to making progress so far has been the opacity of numbers and of the true nature of decisions. And that's what allows people to look the other way or give the benefit of the doubt. It's like, well, they probably didn't mean it like that. Or, things look good on the surface. I'm sure they're doing all they can behind closed doors. Now people are expecting you to demonstrate that and to show it. So I think sharing that information is probably going to be your best bet if you're really wanting to demonstrate change.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts on that?
I just had a few really quickly. If the brand has the funding to do it, especially during crisis times, I used to work for a crisis communications firm, and that's literally what we would do is when organizations got into these types of issues, we would go in and create a lot of the plans that Jazz was talking about. But the next level that you also do is you work with those communities that you have impacted to make those changes. So a lot of that would look like donations to churches, or creating those partnerships within that particular community to make things better. But I think when you get into those types of situations of truly cancel culture, where your business has been impacted, I would highly recommend hiring a crisis communication organization that has specialties in those deep levels of community outreach programs, so that you can get that word of mouth to help repair the image of the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, guys, this has been a really incredible conversation. I talk to all of you like in daily life, but I'm just so happy that we got to get together and have this conversation, especially for brands who just don't know where to go, don't know where to start, and kind of need that advice to jumpstart. So I appreciate all of you so much for your time today, being here, talking about it, giving your energy up for it. And I just wanted to let the audience know that be sure to follow all of these ladies and follow their work, because you'll get some amazing information out of it. All of their handles are included in the comment section so that you can go give them a follow now and start watching. And then I'll bring Cami back up because we have a pretty good exercise after our panel. That's going to be really relaxing and fun for everybody. But I just wanted to say thank you again, Jazz, Erica, and Nell, for being here and for doing Social Media Breakfast today and talking about this topic in this time.
For sure.
Thank you so much, ladies, for giving up your time and your energy again to help all of us understand a little bit better, and also just the insights. It's been amazing. The comments have blown up. I'm not kidding. You guys have to go back and read how amazing you are, what kind of impact you're making here. A huge impact. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to bring up Geeka, and I'll keep all of you here for a moment. Maybe for those of you, for my panel, if you need to go, just feel free to jump off anytime. All right. Yeah, because I know people have work and life and business. So awesome. If you want to stay in, they're actually at the bottom. So Geeka's here with us. Oh, Mila, did you? Oh, sorry, Jasmine. There she goes. Okay, good. Awesome.
Right.
So Geeka, thank you. So Geeka, you might know, if you've come to Social Media Breakfast, you've seen Geeka's face. She comes, and she's been coming for the basic 11 years that we've been doing Social Media Breakfast. And she does a really cool practice called Feldenkrais. I'm going to let her talk to you about it. She's going to lead us through a very quick exercise. So I recommend that many of you stay if you can and just have this moment so that we've had a lot of stress in the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months, like 2020, all of 2020. What's up with that, Geeka?
It's been
one thing after another. So
it's been really crazy. Thank you. Thank
you.
I'm
going to again jump out, and I'm going to let you lead this.
If you stay, if I can watch you, that'd be great.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
So first of all,
I'll leave the.
Thank you, Cami, and thank you, ladies who were on the panel. I just, my heart and my ears and my head are full. I think I'll keep this really, really brief, maybe even briefer than I ordinarily would. Just take a moment to notice where you're sitting. Notice whether you have your feet on the ground. Notice your sit bones on your chair. Feel that you've got the support of the ground underneath you. You've got the earth under your floor, the floor under your feet, the chair, whatever you're sitting on under you. Just feel the support of the ground underneath you. And then feel the length of your spine from the tailbone up through your pelvis, the back of your waist, between each pair of ribs, along your neck, all the way up to the base of your skull. And know that you're sitting just fine. You don't need to correct anything. Just notice how you sit. Notice that your breath comes in and your breath goes out. Notice that perhaps your shape changes a little bit as breath comes in and breath goes out. Do you breathe in through your nose or do you breathe in through your mouth? Notice the support again of the floor underneath your feet and just push into that support just a little bit. So press your feet into the floor a little bit and see how that feels. See if that changes anything in how your sit bones are on the chair. And then push a little more into your right foot. So you have a little stronger sense of pushing into the right foot. How does that change how you sit on the floor, on the chair, sorry. Then push a little into your left foot and feel how that shifts something in how you sit on the floor. Maybe even it shifts something in your neck, in your head. And then settle back into sitting on both sit bones. Pause for a moment. Feel your breath coming in and your breath going out. And then bring one hand to rest on your sternum. Your sternum is your chest bone. And then your other hand to rest on the back of that hand. And then imagine that you have a little circle under your hands. And then starting at the bottom of that circle, make a full circle around, just very softly moving your skin in a circle. And then make it a circle and a quarter of a circle. So you come up a little bit and then you come back down to your starting point. Doesn't matter which direction you go, you make a full circle and then a quarter of a circle, and then you come back down to your starting point. And then the next time you do it, as you make that circle and a quarter, breathe in through your nose. And when you come to the top of that circle and a quarter, come back down and breathe out through pursed lips. So it's a circle and a quarter breathing in, and a quarter circle back down, breathing out through pursed lips. And I'm going to add just a couple more things to that. As you breathe in, think of something you're grateful for. Something like social media breakfast and our panelists this morning. So many things to be grateful for. Think of that as you breathe in, and maybe even let a little smile come to your lips. And then breathe out through pursed lips. And you can imagine, even as you breathe out, that you're sharing that gratitude, that expansive feeling in the space around you. You can let that get as expansive as you want. Do that a couple more times at your own pace. And then when you're ready, let your hands rest on your thighs. Feel your breath coming in and your breath going out. Feel your feet on the floor, the support of the ground beneath you, the support of the chair under your sit bones, the length of your spine, the shape of your spine. Notice how you breathe now. This little circle and a quarter thing we did is called a heart hug. I learned it from Eleanor Silverstein, and it was developed by Linda Tellington Jones. But the beautiful thing about it is that it's very calming. It affects, if you're paying attention to neurobiology, it affects the vagus nerve system. Basically, it makes us a little calmer. So you can use it anytime you like. And especially in these times, it's a really lovely thing to do. So thank you for letting me share that with you.
Thank you. I feel so calm now. I don't even know if I want to talk. It's nice.
I know, and I felt like that was especially nice when I was hearing Jasmine talk about how tender-hearted we are, and that just feels just right now.
It does. Thank you so much, Gika. We put Gika's information in the comments so you can find out what she does. She actually has a free class every Tuesday that you might want to consider joining, that goes a little bit longer than this.
It's about an hour.
Right. And if you decide that it's something you want, a practice that you want to go forth from there, I mean, she'll give you more information after your free classes, but she also has a special deal just for people that are in social media breakfast. So I think the code is SMBHOU. It's all in the event page, all of that information as well. So thank you so much, Gika. Thank you to the panel. You guys are amazing. I will say bye to you guys on the back end. Here in the back end, we have a little green room. So thank you guys so much for being here. All of you, whoever you are, you're here. That means that you have a heart to make change in the world. And so we appreciate that. Thanks, guys. Bye.